And welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm Eric Rosales. Thank you for joining us. John Jessup has the night off. Well, the clock is ticking and many Americans await the testimony of Judge Brett Kavanaugh and the woman accusing him of sexual assault.
The Supreme Court nominee and Dr. Christine Ford will testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee Thursday.
But ahead of that, Kavanaugh and the White House are out in front trying to defend his reputation and integrity. Amber Strong has the story from Washington.
The Democrats are playing a con game, C-O-N, a con game.
During a press conference today at the UN, President Trump defended his nominee, while the White House says it's open to a public testimony from Kavanaugh's second accuser, Deborah Ramirez.
You've said that everybody's voices should be heard. So does the president want Ms. Ramirez to appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee as well?
Certainly we would be open to that, and that process could take place on Thursday.
The administration and Kavanaugh have been on the offense since the New Yorker published the account of that second accuser Sunday. Kavanaugh, in an unprecedented move, defended his name in a sit-down interview with Fox News.
I've never sexually assaulted anyone. I did not have sexual intercourse or anything close to sexual intercourse in high school or for many years thereafter.
And sent a clear message to his critics.
I'm not going anywhere.
He also says he's determined to defend a reputation he's worked so hard to build. Meanwhile, negotiations continue for Thursday's hearing, with Ford's attorney sending a letter to the Senate Judiciary condemning their decision to use an experienced sex crime prosecutor to question their client, calling it unfair. This leads observers to question whether Ford will show at all on Thursday. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
All right, thank you, Amber. Well, CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now from the Hill. Abigail, what are you hearing up there from lawmakers?
Well, today I'm hearing that Judge Kavanaugh's fate really hangs in 2 to 3 key senators, Jeff Flake, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. They are very much so looking forward to hearing from both parties on Thursday, while many other senators on both sides of the aisle have already determined how they will vote on Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. But Democrats are still calling for an FBI investigation into both Dr. Ford's allegations as well as Deborah Ramirez's. But Republicans say it is time to move this process along. And I spoke with Senator John Thune earlier today, who says that he thinks these new allegations are a calculated effort to derail Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. Take a look at what he told me.
A lot of these latest allegations seem very calculated to try and derail the nomination, and clearly are an attempt to destroy Judge Kavanaugh's reputation. But it seems like awfully thin rule to destroy a person's reputation when you can't even get the New York Times, who went to 24 different people to try and corroborate this latest story and couldn't find anybody that could. The process, in my view, has been very fair to Democrats. They've had ample opportunities to ask questions both in closed and open sessions, and questions for the record. Lots of background checks, obviously, of this judge over the past 25 years. At some point, this process has to move forward. And to me, these are clearly attempts, and frankly, attempts by the Democrats that I think they ought to, in many cases, be ashamed of, to try at the 11th hour to destroy the reputation of an individual based upon some, I would argue, pretty flimsy evidence. I can't see at this point where there is any evidence to suggest that she ought to come before. I mean, she herself has said that she's trying to search her memory to remember exactly what happened. They, again, had kind of tried to go around, short circuit this process, take this directly to the Democrats, not give Republicans on the committee access to the information. It seems to me to be a very calculated attempt by the Democrats and to maneuver around and try again to do everything they can to delay, obstruct, block, and ultimately derail the nomination. And I think the American people see through that.
Now, despite the White House saying that Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying that they are willing to hear from the second accuser, Deborah Ramirez, as Senator John Thune said, I have not heard of any movement on the Hill to get Ramirez to testify as well.
You know, Abby, looking from the outside, it really does look calculated there as that they're planning something. But what can we expect on Thursday?
Well, I know we've said this race before, but truly a supreme showdown. The Republicans are going to bring in outside counsel to question Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh. They have not named who that will be, but it is going to be an intense day, an intense hearing. It will be a smaller hearing room than what we saw last time when Judge Kavanaugh spoke, and that is at Dr. Ford's request. She asked the Senate Judiciary Committee to do anything they can to make this less of a media circus than it already has become. So we will see it in a different hearing room. Hopefully that will stop as many protesters getting into the hearing room and disrupting like we saw last time. And speaking of protesters, they are already on the Hill. There have already been dozens of arrests this week. And then last night we saw Senator Ted Cruz and his wife chased out of a restaurant by protesters, so we can expect many more of them throughout the week. But on the other side, I've heard of a lot of supporters of Judge Kavanaugh who are going to rally on the Hill for him on Thursday. I've heard of buses of students coming in, so we're going to have both sides have a lot of support there. And I think from Judge Kavanaugh, we can expect him to repeat almost verbatim what he's been saying in his statements and what he said last night in his Fox interview, just categorically denying these allegations. So we'll see what happens on Thursday.
All right, Abigail Robertson, thank you very much for your time.
And Stephen Aden is the Chief Legal Officer at Americans United for Life, and he joins us now. Stephen, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Stephen, a big day Thursday for Judge Brett Kavanaugh as he gets ready to testify. Ahead of that, do you think that he is getting fair treatment here from the media? There's a lot of talk about innocent until proven guilty. Is he getting that?
I don't think he's getting fair treatment from the media at all. I think they are bending over backwards to accommodate the Democratic Party's talking points on this nomination. Look at the way that even unsubstantiated allegations that Dr. Ford has brought, and by the way, I don't doubt that she was terribly abused at some point, but she can't even remember when or where it was. Those would not pass muster in any court of law, and yet they're considered sufficient to hold another hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Every woman who has credible allegations, I believe, deserves the right to be heard. But I do think that when her story is told before the public on Thursday, that it just won't hold water.
Yeah. Do you think this complicated situation, Stephen, is made even more complex in this whole Me Too era? These women are bringing very serious allegations.
It does make it more complex because it's important to separate the fact from the fiction. The fact is that many women experience harassment in school, in the workplace, elsewhere, and I am glad to see more and more women willing to stand up and face their accusers. But when you have that taken to the extreme by certain forces on the Democratic side, certain members of the media, so that to this point you have an unsubstantiated series of allegations in the New Yorker magazine by somebody who admits that she was very drunk. It took her 6 days, she said in the New Yorker, to sort through her memory and come up with the conclusion that it was Brett Kavanaugh who did this abominable thing to her. And there are no corroborating witnesses by the New Yorker's own admission. They interviewed 17 people trying to get somebody to corroborate her story and could not find a single one. Then, in my estimation, you've gone too far. There is due process in America still. The process that is due Judge Kavanaugh is to respect his lifelong career, establishing an impeccable reputation as a brilliant jurist, as a strong man of faith, a family man, a husband, father, coach, all these things that he has built a lifetime toward. And now to see it threatened by irresponsible allegations in the media that are not even before the Senate Judiciary Committee right now really does make you wonder if anybody would be willing to go through this for the sake of higher office.
Yeah, it does seem like the two sides are becoming, wider and wider. The gap between them is becoming wider and wider. This is played out in a very partisan way. What is your take on that, Stephen?
Yeah, my take on that is that Democrats are becoming more and more desperate to stop Judge Kavanaugh from getting on the Supreme Court because they know that Roe versus Wade may be at stake. They know that here is a jurist who doesn't care what people think, obviously, and this whole process has made that super clear. He really cares what the truth is. He will stand up to powerful forces. In my view, he may be a justice who would erode or even overturn the so-called fundamental right to destroy human life that the Supreme Court found in Roe versus Wade in 1973. So the silver lining in all of this may be that we're seeing what kind of a man, what kind of a judge Brett Kavanaugh really is. I'm liking what I see, frankly.
Stephen, final question for you. Do you think Judge Brett Kavanaugh's career can survive these allegations regardless of if he's confirmed or not?
I think Judge Kavanaugh will defend himself very ably on Thursday. I believe that he will clear his name, and I think that the history, looking back on all of this, will be that Democrats tried some very outrageous and sleazy tactics to destroy a good man, and that they were ultimately unsuccessful.
All right, Stephen Naden with the Americans United for Life. Thank you so much. Great to have you.
In other news, that is, the United Nations General Assembly is taking place this week in New York City. President Trump took to the podium today, spreading the message of America First to leaders from around the world. CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us now, live from the North Lawn. Ben.
Well, Eric, in about a 35-minute speech, the president covered a wide range of topics, specifically pointing out that the sanctions will remain in place against North Korea until they get rid of their nuclear program. But the driving theme is how Trump will continue to put his country first. President Trump returned to the world stage, delivering his second address to the UN General Assembly. In it, he doubled down on the White House's policy of America First.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
Just last year, Trump stood here calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
Today, he changed his tune against the rogue regime following his historic summit with the North Korean dictator.
Since that meeting, we have already seen a number of encouraging measures that few could have imagined only a short time ago. The missiles and rockets are no longer flying in every direction. Nuclear testing has stopped.
Trump then took aim at Iran.
Iran's leaders sow chaos, death, and destruction.
The U.S. responded by withdrawing from the 2015 nuclear agreement and even reinstated economic sanctions. Trump's now asking nations to join him in isolating Iran.
We cannot allow a regime that chants death to America and that threatens Israel with annihilation to possess the means to deliver a nuclear warhead to any city on earth. Just can't do it.
The commander-in-chief reaffirmed support for Israel and his decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem.
The United States is committed to a future of peace and stability in the region, including peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Trump also announced new sanctions against Venezuela and that, yes, the U.S. will respond in Syria if Bashar al-Assad uses chemical weapons again. This was no doubt a closely watched speech as Trump says the U.S. is committed to making the UN more effective. Eric?
Well, Ben, we know the U.S. response, but what was Iran's response to President Trump telling nations to isolate them?
Hey, Eric, good question. Iran's president is condemning recklessness and disregard of some states for international values and institutions, adding that the sanctions against them amount to an economic war, but they have endured sanctions before and can, quote, overcome this difficult phase as well. Jenna?
All right, thank you, Ben Kennedy at the White House for us. Well, Bible studies are now taking place at the UN. That's due to the efforts of Pastor Jim Garlow. He is stepping down from San Diego's Skyline Church to minister at the UN and also bring Bible studies to federal agencies right here in Washington, D.C. David Brody spoke with Garlow about the new venture.
At the United Nations, we will have the weekly worship services for those who want to attend, who are part of the United Nations. We've just had a few. And then we're launching what's called the Hammarskjöld Society. Dag Hammarskjöld, famous name up there, former Secretary General, who was a Christian. And so the Hammarskjöld Society is an attempt to bring transcendent truths, biblical truths, eternal truths to contemporary governance. And that's designed for the diplomatic corps, for ambassadors. And we're very pleased that Ambassador Nikki Haley met with us, and she's embraced what we're doing. She is so kind and gracious and really endorsing what we're attempting to do, and we're very grateful for that. That's a big deal. It's enormous. We have such high regard and respect for her as does the whole nation. And then down in D.C., we work with Pastor Rick Scarborough, part of our team there, and we have Bible studies on the Hill for members of Congress. And that's not so unique because there are a number of those going on, but also launching Bible studies in the various departments and agencies. And so when you think of, say, Department of Agriculture, Department of Interior, HHS, HUD, the State Department, etc., we're targeting those areas to just bring together people who desire to have biblical truth taught, and that's biblical principles of governance, God's view of governance. How is governance supposed to take place? Because I believe if governance is followed biblically, it reduces human suffering, human pain, and poverty.
How do you go about trying to get permission to do that?
Actually, we have to work with the agencies, each one, okay, and get permission. You need, if you're going to lead a Bible study in Congress, we work through a member of Congress. If we're going to do something in the United Nations, we only work with the blessings of a given nation. We follow protocol there. We just got, we have one Bible study going right now. We're brand new in this part, in one department, and just got permission 2 weeks ago from another department or agency. And just as of yesterday, got what looks like a green light for a third one. So we're working our way through.
That first step you talked about, which is the biblical principles, God's governance, and those principles, that would be then therefore what happens from that? What's the ultimate goal here to make sure if we're living by God's principles, what's the cause and effect here?
Let's take the city of Detroit. City of Detroit in 1960 was a world-class city. In fact, it might have been regarded as one of the most amazing cities in the entire world. 50 years later, it lay in ruins. Why? Principles and the policies that came from them. Some principles are good, some are very bad. Some will build life, some will destroy. So that's illustration one. We want to bring those kind of principles that will make our communities places of peace and tranquility. And people tend to think, well, the Bible is written for my personal edification, and it is, or my family edification and strengthening, yes, or my church structure, yes. But God's also the God of government. He invented government. He loves nations. He established nations. He established the borders of nations. And so consequently, He has a lot to say about the government.
How the Trump administration is working to secure the release of an American pastor imprisoned in Turkey.
Welcome back. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is again calling for the release of an American pastor imprisoned in Turkey. Pastor Andrew Brunson is currently under house arrest after nearly 2 years in jail. Turkey is hinting that it may be willing to negotiate Brunson's release, a move Pompeo welcomed this week, telling reporters, quote, "Yes, he could be released this month. He should have been released last month, and he should be released today."
Well, Pastor Brunson's situation has led to an international crisis between the two NATO allies.
As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, there is much more at stake than just politics.
The Turkish government moved Pastor Brunson from jail to house arrest in July. Although the 50-year-old pastor has ministered in the country for more than 2 decades, the Turkish government charged Brunson with conspiring against President Erdogan's rule during a 2016 attempted coup. The Trump administration calls those charges bogus and has made securing Pastor Brunson's freedom a priority.
I don't think there's ever been any administration, any president that has brought up a prisoner of conscience, a prisoner who's in prison because of his faith, more than any other one than President Reagan did for Natan Sharansky. So this is historic.
And the Trump administration went beyond talking, leveling sanctions on Turkey that put its currency into a free fall.
All of the secular media, without exception, are saying, a pastor, who cares about a pastor? The trade with Turkey is much more important. The money and the value of the lira is much more important.
But the Trump administration said, no, a pastor who's falsely accused and is in prison is important to us, and we're willing to really put our money where our mouths are, and they're taking a strong stand.
Egyptian-born Michael Youssef says other nations are paying attention.
Now, the world is watching this. They are not ignoring this. They know that they're going to be next unless they stop persecuting Christians.
Franklin Graham called Christians to pray and for the U.S. to be careful.
First, I would ask everybody who's watching right now, the Christians, to pray for Andrew Brunson. He's been falsely accused. This is just a sham. Turkey, we have to remember that this is a country that is fast becoming a radical Islamic state. I think we need to get Brunson home, and we need to be very careful with whatever we do as a country with Turkey until they change leadership and change the direction they're going.
Karam says there's much more at stake than an international crisis between NATO allies.
There's been many people, ourselves included, that believed God was going to do something in Izmir, the ancient Smyrna, Izmir, where Andrew Brunson is today, that was going to impact not only Turkey, but all the nations around it. Because it's clear that Andrew Brunson is in prison or under arrest for one reason, and that's his hope and faith in Jesus Christ as the Messiah, not only of the West, but of the entire world.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Now look at the economic impact of Hurricane Florence.
It's been about 11 days since Hurricane Florence made landfall.
Yeah, but in some areas of the Carolinas, floodwaters still have not gone down. North Carolina's governor says around 400 roads remained closed. Thousands are still without power. Moody's Analytics predicts property damage totaling at least $17 billion. Eric, making Hurricane Florence one of the top 10 most expensive hurricanes to hit the United States.
Wow. And in the wake of Florence, many ministries are stepping up to help those hardest hit. CBN's own Operation Blessing has been on the ground since the storm came ashore.
And they do some amazing work. Well, here's a look at how OB is helping to bring help, is bringing help and hope.
When Hurricane Florence hit Lumberton, North Carolina, Diane Turner and her family couldn't sleep for days.
Because I've never had insomnia, but I didn't sleep for several days there. Several nights. My husband didn't sleep in bed that night. He said, we can't, those trees are likely to fall. And the wind was fierce.
In the middle of the night, a tree came crashing down.
It sounded like a big boom.
They went out in the morning to find a pretty big tree across the yard. Diane couldn't do anything about it on her own. She's been taking care of her 90-year-old mother-in-law, who had to be evacuated from her nursing home. They didn't know what to do about the tree. Then, Operation Blessing showed up. We got right to work cutting the tree apart into manageable pieces to be hauled off. I grabbed one of the saws myself. Diane was grateful not only for the help we gave her, but for what we've been doing for thousands of hurricane victims in North Carolina.
I've seen Jesus in the work that y'all are doing, and God's hand on you there at East Lumberton Baptist Church. I see it on the TV or the Facebook, and that y'all would come this distance to do something for people that you don't even know speaks well of all of you.
Once we took care of the tree at Diane's, the crew packed up and got ready for the next job. Before we left, we prayed with Diane and her mother-in-law.
I will pray for all of you because it's a good thing you're doing. Thank you with all our hearts. Thank you for everything you've done.
We saw a lot of that there, strangers helping strangers. It's wonderful.
Great job. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. That's all we have for today.
Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.